David Walliams, the Ice Monster. Chapter 2. Elsie loved all the rats and pigeons that would find their way inside Wormy Hall. If she had any food, she would share it with them and tend to any broken wings and legs. In return, they would snuggle up to her, which made her feel less lonely. In her heart, Elsie felt a deep connection to these animals that Mrs. Carroll called vermin. To her, they were little creatures all alone in the world, just like her. Elsie had noticed how the rats got into the orphanage by going across a leaky pipe that came down from the ceiling. One thing that set Elsie apart from her fellow orphans was her feet. Elsie didn't have ordinary feet, she had monkey feet. The advantage of having long thick toes that could grip like fingers was that it made climbing easy. So one night, when everyone else was asleep, Elsie went across the pipe to see where the rats came in. Just as she had thought, there was a small rat-sized hole at the top of the wall. After that, every night after candles out, Elsie went across the pipe using her monkey feet. Once at the top, she would scrape away at the brickwork with her fingernails. Night after night she scraped and scraped, making the hole bigger and bigger. Eventually the hole was just large enough for Elsie to squeeze her tiny body through it. However, she couldn't leave Wormley Hall without saying goodbye to her 25 friends. "Wake up," she said. Little eyes began to appear out of the dark. "I'm going to run away tonight. Who's coming with me?" There were murmurs of I'm too scared, and Curdle will kill us, and they'll catch us and beat us to death. The littlest of the lot was named Nancy. She looked up to Elsie like she was a big sister. Nancy whispered, "Where are you going?" "I don't know," replied the girl. "Anywhere but here. Please don't forget about us." "Never." "Promise?" "I've promised," said Elsie. "I'll see you all again one day." "I'm going to miss your stories," said another orphan. "Me too," said another. "Next time I see you, I'll tell you the greatest story of all." "Good luck, Elsie," said Nancy. "You'll always be in here," replied Elsie, patting her chest. The girl gave one last shimmy up the pipe with her monkey feet. She squeezed herself through the hole in the wall, and with one final wiggle she was gone. Elsie ran and ran and ran as fast as she possibly could. She didn't dare look back. She was free but alone, and now she had to fend for herself on the streets of London, even though she'd never been outside the orphanage before. The big city was a scary place, especially for a girl. Danger lurked in every corner. Soon enough, though, Elsie taught herself how to steal food from the market stalls. As for bed, she found an old tin bath to sleep in, and used old newspapers as sheets. In her mind, Elsie pretended that it was a grand four-post bed fit for a queen. With no home or family, Elsie was what was known as an urchin. Victorian London was teeming with them. Elsie didn't look much like a hero. However, as you will soon discover, heroes come in all shapes. Living on the streets of London had its advantages. You slept under the stars, you ate all the fresh fruit and vegetables you could swipe. Best of all, you were the first to know about everything. News spread fast, and this was big news. Having never been to school, Elsie couldn't read or write. However, the newspaper sellers would hollow the headlines to passers-by. Could this be true? A real-life monster, 10,000 of years old too? Elsie was old enough to know that monsters weren't real, and young enough to believe that they might just be. The girl had just swiped an apple off a market stall for her breakfast. Munching contentedly, she wove her way through the march of top-hatted gentlemen heading for work, until she reached the newspaper stand. "Get lost, you little thief!" shouted the newspaper seller. He whacked the girl on the back of her head with a rolled-up copy of the Times. "You got whacked by grown-ups every day if you were an urchin. You were the lowest of the low. At least it made a welcome change from being battered with a broomstick at Wormwood. I only want to look, pleaded Elsie. These newspapers are not for looking at, they are for buying. Now scram, before I give you a kick where the sun doesn't shine. Not being a fan of a boot up bottom, Elsie smiled at the man and ran off down the street. She turned into an alleyway, then moved into the back of her grubby trousers and pulled out a copy of the Times. The girl had become an expert thief. There were big, bold black letters on the front of the page. Elsie knew these spelled out words, but it all looked jumbled up to her. The picture underneath did speak to her, though. It was a peculiar creature that looked like an elephant. Once she'd poked her head through the flap in a circus tent to get a free show, and seen an elephant performing tricks. However, this elephant was covered in thick hair, and its tusks were long and curved. It was encased in a huge block of ice, and a number of Arctic explorers were standing around it, looking proud. Despite the creature's bizarre appearance, Elsie found it hard to think of the poor thing as a monster. Monster she was scared of. This animal you wanted to hold. It looked a great deal smaller than the elephant she'd seen at the circus. Perhaps it was a baby. Despite having been dead for thousands of years, it still looked lost and wild. As an urchin, Elsie was always on the outside looking in. Every day she would see a whole other London whirling around her, horse-drawn carriages speeding down the street, children in uniform marching off to school, lords and ladies stepping over her as they left the royal crowd. Elsie's brain was forever buzzing with questions. Where was everyone going to at such a pace? What did those scrumptious-looking cakes in the bakery window actually taste like? And what was inside all of those magnificent buildings? One day the girl decided to step out of her world and into the other. Elsie was standing in front of the most magnificent building of all, the Natural History Museum. When she tried to walk in, she was immediately thrown out by the hobnail-booted brute of a security guard, Mr. Clout. "I don't want no trouble from filthy beggars like you," he shouted as he hurled her down the steps. Elsie was not one to give up that easily, so she sneaked in behind a gaggle of top-hatted gentlemen. At once the girl marvelled at this universe of wonder. The museum was a treasure trove of life-size models of whales, stuffed animals, dinosaur bones, and floor-to-ceiling paintings of creatures that had long since become extinct. Soon she was sneaking into the museum every single day. Elsie couldn't read, but she earwigged in on the guides and soon became something of an expert. So when she saw a picture of the ice monster on the front page of the newspaper, she knew instantly that it was, in fact, a woolly mammoth. Elsie had learned that these creatures had lived during the Ice Age, when saber-toothed tigers, giant bears, sloths, and beavers stalked the earth, and birds like the pteranodon, a bird bigger than a person, darkened the skies. Elsie was desperate to follow the story of the ice monster, so every morning she swiped another newspaper to search for news of the creature. Weeks passed, and then one day she spotted a jumble of letters she recognized on the front page of the newspaper. They looked exactly like the ones she'd seen on the side of her favorite building. Elsie knew she had to meet it. Soon after the ice monster was found, London was plunged into the cruelest of winters. A bitter wind brought a flurry of snow. Before long, the entire city was hushed by a thick covering of white. The River Thames froze over. In this kind of weather, homeless children like Elsie perished in doorways. They would go to sleep and never wake up to be found at dawn with a dusting of frost on their faces. Poor Elsie was huddling in her tin bath under a pile of newspapers, trying to keep warm. She looked at her hands. They were shaking with the cold and turning blue. The girl almost missed Wormley Hall. Almost, but not